actually funny. I didn't think that would happen. So I kind of wonder if, Felicia Sumnes, I think it was. I kind of wonder if we've gotten past maybe the worst of it, or we're in the worst of it right now and it's going to start to swing back. That's one kind of thing I wonder. The second thing is, people talk about racism and they use these kind of like crazy definitions and they talk about white people. I think there's an unfairly high burden placed on white people, as strange as it is sometimes, when it comes to dealing with certain types of actions. Like, if you make fun of somebody for their skin color, they're probably going to feel bad for it. That's probably going to be almost universally true. The idea that white people are somehow immune to that and every other social group is not is just kind of strange. You know, you can try to find reasons why. Like, somebody would be like, oh, well, white people are in a position of power. And it's like, okay, well, can I be anti-Semitic? Because there's a lot of Jewish bankers and people running media and shit, right? That should be okay, because they have a lot of power. But nobody would say that. What about racist towards Chinese people that are doing well, right? That people will pull out these kind of esoteric, or I should say academic definitions of racism to justify racism against white people, but they wouldn't pass literally any other test. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that was my two main thoughts. I wonder if we're at the peak of the anti-white sentiment, and I think people need to stop having like this ultra high expectation of the average white person to just have a bunch of people who are racist towards them, but be okay with it.
So
Hunter, you said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Hunter, you said that you don't think it causes systemic harm, the anti-white sentiment. Can you define that a little bit? What do you mean by systemic harm? And,
yeah, I mean, usually when I'm talking about systemic racism, I'm just referring to any kind of a system, whether it be a social system or a established institution that leads to disproportionate negative results that impact one racial group more than another. So that's why I talk about the criminal justice system, for example, because there's no intent there to screw over black people. However, unfortunately, according to the statistics, black people are disproportionately screwed over by that criminal justice system. What I mean when I say the systemic thing as far as white people, generally it's just kind of accepted that white people are in a position of power right now. And no, that doesn't mean that that justifies being racist towards white people. But what it does mean is that it's far less likely that there will be some kind of systemic inequalities that arise from people saying dumb shit on Twitter against white people. Again, I'm not saying that justifies it. It doesn't. But I just think that that's something important to take into account.
I think the definition of system you're using is taking system almost up to like a global scale or a national scale. But Twitter itself is a system that is skewed against white people. So you could say, like, you can have different there's obviously systems within systems within systems.
I don't know if it's skewed. How is it skewed against white people other than people making like anti-white tweets? I get that, but like, what is
I mean, yeah, I'm saying like, so like
impacting.
The skewer is that, like, you can literally, there are certain classifications of people on Twitter that can act almost with impunity. Like, I've seen comments made about killing white people or killing certain politicians that blow me away.
Yeah, you can't talk about killing Jews on Twitter.
Of course, yeah.
And it's like, I can tell why they're not getting banned, and it's probably because they have a certain political disposition. You're less likely to get banned, but if you're on the right targeting certain groups of people, like, you can get dinged for hate speech, like, almost immediately.
Sure. Well, then maybe that would be maybe that's a good example then of where there is some kind of a systemic inequality against white people. That could definitely be a thing. Yeah.
Well, what's weird for me is I've spent most of my life, because I'm pretty left-leaning and run in pretty left-leaning circles, most of my life has been spent in systems where white people are punished more for expressing their beliefs, opinions, and prejudices than anybody else. So while I agree, if on a global scale, sure, it's better to be white, but I've been in many situations, like this panel. The whiter you are in this panel, probably the less freedom you have to say whatever you want without losing your fucking job. Like, we all know that.
I think something that's important to keep in mind when we talk about systemic racism or systemic injustice, the system there, I think, is standing in war for, like, our broader institutions. So the institutions of, like, academia, like schools, or the institution of criminal justice, or maybe the institution related to voting or medicine. I don't know if I would say that, like, systemic injustice because people are mean to you on a certain platform, a social media platform, is, like, the same thing.
Yeah, but Twitter is the bigger... the social media companies as a conglomerate are bigger than... maybe schools or certain groups of schools.
What's the negative outcome that is impacting white people at disproportionate rates? Like,
you lose your job
on Twitter being rude to white people.
You can't talk, or you lose your job, or if you live in a horrible dystopian fascist state like Loner Box, you could go to jail.
I'm not sure what you mean. How, like, you can get in trouble or get fired if for a bad tweet, yes, and sometimes that can be really ridiculously over
Yeah,
the
but
top.
what makes a bad tweet from
But-
you and what makes a bad tweet from me are different. I can say shit that you can't.
But maybe
And
like
then,
what? Say it.
you're talking
And then
about-
Ga-
like,
Gambit,
yeah, like, is this
Gambit
like
can
an
say shit
identity
that I
politics
can't.
thing?
Yeah. Well, it's not identity politics. Literally, your race gives you, or I could say shit about you that you can't say about me. I could say, wow, Hunter was such a typical white man on the panel. Listen to the shit he said. You could
Please.
literally just swap white for Jewish and Mr. Girl for Hunter, and then say the same tweet about me, and you will get banned.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of falls right in line with what I was already saying, though, is that there is, in fact, a growing anti-white sentiment, and it's also more socially acceptable to shit on white people. But the problem
know,
is,
but-
again, is that, well, hold on. White people, at least in America, make up the majority. Not, for now at least, okay? So what that means is that if you are in a group with your friends and you're cracking jokes over and over again at the expense of black people, you have
Yes.
a higher likelihood of leading to an actual impact or a material harm on black people simply because they make up a smaller demographic in the country. Less people have seen black people or interacted with black people in America, and just based on that fact alone, that means that it has a higher likelihood of causing actual harm or reinforcing negative stereotypes.
I think that
Whereas,
that
okay,
I
you're-
think that can be true. So this is a huge problem that people on the left have. People on the left are really good at breaking apart and generally hopefully, are good at analyzing classes or groups of people, and that's fine. But it doesn't distill down to the individual level. Something may be true on a macro level. You're not gonna feel it on a macro level. On a macro level, white people are privileged. You're not generally getting shot down in the United States for being white. On the macro level,
Right.
that's absolutely true. But if you're like a poor dude that lives in like a meth fucked town, like a fucking trailer park, and you've got somebody talking that white privilege shit at you, you're gonna feel like, what the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck is my
Right.
privilege? I don't feel it, right? Or if you're in a group hanging out with people, and 50 people call you cracker, mayo, blah, 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 and you're like, okay, well, and then you like drop an N-word, and everybody's like beating the shit out of you now, while they're kicking your ass, and they're saying like, well, it's okay, like systemically you're privileged, like nobody's gonna feel that. It's on the micro
agree
level,
with
it's all, yeah. So even if these things are true on a macro level, I don't think it's necessarily relevant. It might be good when talking about macro level things, but individuals aren't going to be okay with that disparity in treatment. I don't
Well,
think that's
the-
a recipe
okay,
for success.
Just
Also,
to
social-
clarify,
social-
if I could just
social-
clarify really quick though, really quick to what Destiny said. I'm talking about as far as the macro level. Then you have a higher likelihood of having negative downstream effects. I am not saying that justifies making racist jokes about white people because they are less likely to feel those effects. I think that if you are being racist against somebody, again, it's wrong no matter what. There's really no context where I would find racism to be justifiable. It's only that if you, as a white person, are making fun of black people, that has a higher likelihood of leading to harm. I'm not using it as a justification to make fun of white people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Social media companies are not a micro level. This is where most, maybe for certain classes of people, certainly most human communication occurs, especially non-personal human communication. Places where we talk non-privately with each other is mostly governed by these companies, and their policies are all slanted anti-white.
Yeah.
I think just to-
I agree,
Sorry, go ahead.
I agree with almost everything that y'all have said. So I definitely think like anti-white sentiments on the rise, and I think it's disgusting. I think like when we look back to like the C-word discourse that just happened recently, it was funny to hear that like people had like this idea that yes, you should be able to use this slur against white people indiscriminately. So it was pretty crazy. My only thing about this that I want to kind of get y'all thoughts on are, it seems like a lot of the anti-white sentiment is coming from like the white radical left though. Like it's like I agree that there are black racist people. Like I agree that there's racist people everywhere, but the people that are making these policies, the people that are like really stirring up a lot of this anti-white sentiment, is white people. That's the thing that's weird to me. It's like white radical leftists are the ones who are like pushing this onto the white race somewhere.
Yeah,
Do y'all
there's,
see it that way too?
That's
or?
kind of
We're gonna say real quick. There's like a quote. There's like a meme where it's like making fun of white people for being white is the whitest thing you can possibly do, and it's like 100%
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say is that like the problem with getting rid of like trying to get rid of anti-white racism is you can't really call out the fact that this is like a very white problem. I think especially
I think
in
you're all
parts
doing
of
it
the,
right now. I think you're doing it right now.
In parts of the BLM protests, I kind of noticed, especially in very, very white parts of the United States, or even in Scotland as well, it was just like there was this real kind of like lack of like there was always this kind of like ideological confusion about like what do we actually want to achieve. Like it was really hard to get an answer out of people at a lot of times. I think there was someone from Portland I knew who was saying that like why were all those protesters, like those Antifa people, just so obsessed with the police when the black community in Portland didn't really feel like the police was anywhere near their biggest problem. Like the biggest problem for black people in Portland was like gentrification or housing discrimination or employment access and things like that. But then you find yourself in a position where you're like, well, we can't go to these shops at night because Antifa are going to fight the Proud Boys for a 28th day in a row. The problem with that is kind of like, I don't really know what to call that other than like, I guess like the phrase is like impotence corrupts just as much as power. Like this is kind of like well-intentioned, like maybe like left-leaning white people who just had no idea how to help. You know,
I shudder to call them like well-intentioned. I think there's a rising like radical white people that want to view themselves as virtuous to themselves and to their friends, so they take these like really dumbass positions that nobody actually agrees with. It's like when you talk about like Antifa, right? Like you don't see an army of black people saying, hey, we need Antifa to step up for us, we need protection from the Proud Boys. No, they've decided that themselves, and they've taken these ridiculous positions, and it's I don't think it's coming from like black people asking Antifa to step up.
Yeah, and I think
numerous-
also you also see one of the things I brought up a couple days ago is there were so many videos. It must have been at least 10 different videos I saw when there were the live streams of all the riots where you've got like these poor black people on camera and they're like begging these like white Antifa kids over and over again, like, please get the fuck out, like leave, nobody wants you to do this, get out of here, like leave, nobody wants this. Yeah.
Hey, I think you're doing it right now. I think you're all doing it. I think you're all saying like white people, right? The last 5 things everybody says been complaining about white people.
Well, but that's because this is where this comes from.
Wait. I want to break down what just fucking happened here because it's blowing my mind. Yeah, fuck you, Steven. We start out. Gambit says, "Well, you know, I don't think black people are to blame for this at all. Maybe there's a couple bad eggs, but mostly black people are really nice." And everybody starts fumbling to be, "Oh yeah, it's not white people hate white people. That's where all the racism is coming from. All the Antifa. Let's throw Antifa under the bus. Look, I'll come up with a Proud Boys Antifa. I can name all the worst white people I can think of." And everybody's foaming at their mouth to shit on white people. This is a white grievance panel.
Yeah.
So there are racist black
Yeah,
people.
but we're grieving against other white people because they're the ones that are fucking us up. That's the issue, right?
Grievances that are due to the actions of other white people, just like there can be black grievances due to issues of other black people.
God.
Like I feel like, and maybe it's because
I don't think that's fair.
Maybe it's because black people just didn't do all the crazy sociological education the progressives did. But every time I saw it was really funny. Hassan tried to ambush Myth on stream, and he was like, "Myth, this whole cracker thing is real dumb, right? Like you don't think like it's fine if we call white people cracker, right?" And Myth was like, "No, dude, I don't think probably shouldn't call anybody racial slurs." And it was like, okay, oh shit, that was awkward. But I think even I've talked to a few black people about this, and obviously I don't have all the black people in my binder to talk to. But like when I'm hearing statements of like we should be able to call white people whatever racial slur we want and not say any racial slurs to black people, that just sounds like a really white statement. I can't imagine like other minority groups saying that like, yeah, this is cool, this is okay.
White meaning stupid, right?
No, stupid and white.
That's what. So white.
So this is the thing, Mr. Girl. Like, a lot of black people understand the consequences of being racist. So, like, even the black people that I know that are racist, they aren't usually outwardly racist because it's like self-degrading in some ways. Like, you're not going to exist in a predominantly white society as an anti-white black person. Like that doesn't really exist. Like that person isn't going to have a lot of opportunities. So I do agree with you that there are lots of anti-white sentiments that come from racist black people, racist Mexican people, racist everything. But I think the overwhelming majority of it that we're seeing, and the reason that the things that we're probably going to talk about in this panel are due to other white people.
The majority of all sentiments are due to white people in America because there's more white people. But per capita, I think you'll find a comparable amount of racism in other races. To also it's racism that's encouraged and fostered, especially on social media. Like it's not true. If you're a black person and you tweet out something anti-white, like I'm so sick and tired of white people, you're gonna get 50,000, 100,000 likes, retweets. If there's gonna be a party thrown for you, it's just not true, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, but you were talking about systemic. You were talking about systemic power, and obviously, like
That is
Sure,
systemic power.
anti-white
That's what I'm
people.
saying. That's the system that I live, operate, and work in. In that system,
What is the
Gambit
outcome?
can go.
What's the negative result? Like the
That you
tangible
lose your
harm
job. You've
of
already
black-
asked. This is
or
the
of
third
white
time you've
people?
asked this question. I answer
Wait, no,
every
you don't
single
lose
time.
your job if some random person tweets out "fuck white people" and they get 100,000 likes. You don't lose
You
your
think
job.
it's,
It's not good psychologically.
Steven got banned from
probably.
Twitch. People get banned from these platforms all the time for being the wrong color in the wrong cyber alleyway.
I don't know
all the
how you
time.
would go about even establishing that. I mean, there have been people who've been canceled and fired before for
Well, so this is
tweets
why
that they
my first
made that they
question
should have
was
been
to-
fired over. But
This is why my first question was to nail you down and get you to say there is anti-white sentiment, and a lot of it happens on social
you
media
didn't
and
have
Twitter.
to nail
and
me
it-
down. That was the first thing I said.
I know, but now you're saying it's consequence free. Like it's not. Like we generally, I don't think the six of us are generally violent criminals or drug dealers who are going to really feel, or poor people who really are going to feel the effects of systemic racism. I think that we are going to feel the effects of systemic racism against white people due to the systems that we generally spend time in. So you can say, Gambit, you can say like, yeah, if a black person goes out and is racist, that's gonna hurt them or hurt their lives. But that's in our circles, that's not as true.
Well, what about, Hunter, you mentioned, I'll go back to systemic racism against white people. What about hiring quotas, diversity quotas? Those all affect, the middle class, slightly above. What do you think about that? Does that qualify as systemic racism? Preferential hiring towards minorities?
I mean, I would want to see individual examples of that, but it could absolutely qualify. It's my understanding that quotas are usually not very accepted. If we're talking about something like affirmative action, which I hear people bring up quite a lot, that I did a little bit of digging into it today, actually, and it's much more focused on broadening the net so that it works to expand opportunity rather than just giving preferential treatment to minority groups. But if there were something that were happening where they were refusing to hire white people, then yeah, that would be another system. That in that case, that is a system that is not only disproportionately negatively affecting white people, you can point to the actual harm there. Now we see white people less likely to get jobs because they're white. That would be a tangible harm. That would be a systemic inequality against white people. So if you could demonstrate that, then I would absolutely easily say
we don't need
that,
to
that is a
demonstrate it. You already know this. We already have two groups of people, white people and black people. One is allowed to complain about the other on Twitter and have nothing bad happen to them, and the other, you will lose your Twitter, you'll lose any other social media.
These things? No, stop. You realize that making a dumbass tweet on Twitter is not the same as an employer not hiring people because they're white.
You are obfuscating the point by calling the tweet dumbass. The point is that
How am I
black
obfuscating?
people are allowed to say dumb things about white people on Twitter, and white people are not allowed to say dumb things about black people on Twitter. We can just put the word dumb in there if it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
But the point is that on Twitter and social media sites, you do not have certain rights that that I
but
have even.
I have to agree with the broader point that he's trying to make, right? The point that he's making is in social spaces, anti-white racism is more accepted than other types of racism. And I think we all agree with that.
I'm pretty
right?
sure I already agreed with this like 3 times. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but you keep saying it's consequence free. Like it just doesn't.
I think,
never
okay,
said it
here's
was,
the,
wait,
the,
wait,
the,
hold on,
the
wait,
way-
hold on, no.
Fucking
I never
speak.
said it was consequence free. I was talking
saying-
about
you're saying show
systemic
me-
inequality specifically. It's not
You keep
completely
saying show me the
consequence-free.
negative outcomes.
could-
You're like,
hold on.
where are the negative outcomes? And like,
The negative
I,
outcome
I,
of
I,
the
I
actual
think the
broad
summary
system,
of this
sure,
issue is
but-
it's the Invincible comic where there's like the 52 slurs for white people in the background, and then the guy in front is like the N-word, and he's like, look at what I need just to match a fraction of our power, right? There is obviously some anti-white racism and anti-white sentiment that exists in groups, but it's not as bad as like the historic systemic injustices that other minority people have faced in the United States. I think we can accept all of these statements as true, right?
Yes, and
somebody
also
calling
just
me
to
the
add
C
on
word
that-
on Twitter is not the end of my day, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't affect me that much. But it is pretty fucking annoying they could be outwardly racist towards me, and if I were to say anything remotely back, it would be fucked, right?
Yeah, and if I
No,
could
yeah,
just
okay.
further address what Mr. Girl said a second ago, it is not consequence-free in the sense that if you are a white person on Twitter and you are being, and people are tweeting racial slurs at you all day because you're white, then yes, that of course is not consequence-free. That's going to negatively impact the person who you are acting racist towards. What I said was that it's far less likely to result in a systemic problem,
Yeah.
which means a broad issue that affects white people, again, on a large statistical level.
Well,
you can
that's
point,
what-
well,
Gambit,
hold on,
wait,
wait, wait, just
hold
one
on,
more-
you let Gambit
you can
get in
you
there,
can
Gambit,
point
what
to
were you gonna say?
you can point to systemic inequality, large groups of black people that are harmed by the institution of the criminal justice system right now. You cannot point to
Yeah.
that when it comes to Twitter. That's all. I'm just
So I
trying to distinguish between those
It's a
things.
I think
different
the
system.
problem he's having is it feels like you're not sympathetic because you're trying to extrapolate to the systemic level when he's talking about the harm and the abuse that it takes on that specific individual. So I think that's why I think Mr. Girl agrees with everything that you're saying, but I think the way you're framing it and trying to expand to systemic problems and trying to compare it to anti-black racism, I think that's where y'all are actually having a problem with.
Because
Yeah, I
it's a
don't think
different
Mr.
system.
World-
Like you're saying that I can't talk because black people are over policed and over sentenced.
I never said
But
this.
that-
That you
how
are
do they have
literally
to-
putting
it's a
words in my mouth.
justification.
No, it's
a
not. I
justification. I
specifically
can draw
no,
the
no,
line.
Max,
Okay, you want
stop.
to
I
see? You want to play
specifically
connect the dots,
said
Hunter?
that this
You wanna
was
play
not a
Connect the Dots?
Unhinged.
justification.
Yeah, I just
I
wanted to.
specifically said this was not a justification.
You can. That's fine if you say that, but your argument is that it is. Because when I say,
No,
"Hey, let's
it's
talk about
not.
Twitter," you're like, "Let's talk about jail."
No, I'm
then
simply
stop
talking
talking
about
then
a
it doesn't-
difference between systemic inequality and racism on an interpersonal level.
Do you
Recognizing
agree that
differences
do
there
you
does not
agree that Twitter
justify-
is? Do you
Hmm?
agree that Twitter is a different system from the criminal justice system?
Yes.
Do you agree that this system of Twitter disproportionately negatively punishes and sanctions and kicks out and silences white people?
I think that on Twitter, that system, it's more acceptable to have anti-white sentiment. Yes. I don't know if there are people who are kicked off Twitter for being white. I don't know about that.
I'm not saying for being white. I'm saying for saying the same. Okay. You're just switching the definitions around. If I say the same, if you say something and Gambit says something, and you get punished and he doesn't, were you punished because you were white? But you're going to say no. I was punished for saying something stupid. But you understand that another way of saying that is just that black people have certain rights on social media platforms that white people do not have.
Sure.
Okay, so within that system, the system that I think I spend more time on Twitter than I spend in jail or in court. So that system, the systemic racism that affects white people is the systemic racism that I spend the most time around.
Okay. I guess maybe there was just a miscommunication. I was never trying to offer a justification for any kind of racism directed at white people.
I know you're not, but you keep saying, okay, but show me the negative outcome of that. And then you say, well, because there's worse shit happening to black people in jail. So
I was simply
who cares
trying to
about
make it-
Twitter? It feels
Right, and you know what, I can understand why maybe it did come across that way. I was simply trying to, for the sake of argument, lay out how there are differences between systemic inequalities and interpersonal inequalities. That's all I was trying to do. Are there still inequalities against white people on Twitter? Yes. Is that bad? Yes.
I think something
So I'm
that we
agreeing
could
with you
go,
there.
we could take it one step farther if we wanted to, and we could defend also the argument that Hunter isn't making. He hasn't said this, but we could say that maybe if interpersonal bigotry, we'll say, becomes accepted enough on a cultural level, at some point that might that might actually come down or come out as some sort of systemic like inequality. So one example of this maybe, or at the very least it prevents something from being addressed. I can think of two examples of this. One on a broad level is women are massively outperforming men in school now, like 60-40. It's insane. The graduation rates have gotten insane. Every time we hit an economic downturn, men get fucked even more and more and more. And because of the interpersonal bigotry that we've allowed, we can't actually have a conversation about that. I've had two school administrator people, and maybe this is just by my sample size, maybe, but I've had two people email me and say, I think one was on stream, and I think one emailed me. They said that you can't have this conversation. Like the idea of even bringing it up, it's just nobody wants to talk about it. And then the second thing is, I guess this doesn't count as like an institutional thing quite as much, but there was a black man that was shot by the police after I think like a 6-hour standoff outside some lady's apartment, where this guy had shot into the apartment like 10 times or something, missed the lady's kids, and eventually the police had to shoot and kill this guy. This guy, his family started a GoFundMe for him and raised like, I think over $100,000 for the guy that was shooting into the woman's apartment. And like the woman is standing outside, like crying as people are protesting outside her apartment. She's like, guys, this guy was shooting into my house trying to kill my family. What the fuck? And they're like, well, you're still alive, you know, you're white, blah, 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 or some shit like that. I was like, what the fuck?
I remember that. I seen
Yeah,
that,
that's insane. Now maybe that one thing doesn't necessarily count as systemic, but like reverse the roles, and this is never happening, right?
That's still fucked up.
Fascinating. Let me
examples of that
refocus.
happening in reverse, but yeah.
Let me refocus your question because I think you're hitting on the next question that Mr. Girl has here for discussion. It is, should people of other races have empathy for white people and their experience of being white? Among them, some of the reasons why you just said. Gambit, go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, I would say yes, and it's a lot of because of what Destiny just said. So, like, I'm from a rural area, so I know a lot of like poor or like lower middle class white people, and a lot of them feel like the system isn't. And I don't know if I necessarily agree, but I can definitely empathize with some of their thoughts. But a lot of them feel like they've been looked over, and it's like, oh yeah, you have this privilege, and even though you're poor, it's probably your fault because you're white, so you should have made it. So there's lots of poor white people that feel like the system is not designed to work for them, and it's designed to work for others because of historic problems. So I definitely empathize with those people. And like, and it's crazy because like I know a particular guy who, I don't want to go into the story, but I know a particular guy who deal with situations, and he specifically doesn't want social policies that would help him because he feels like they're only doing it to help others. And like, I see a lot of poor white people fall into that trap where the systemic things that could help them in their situation, they'd much rather not have anything because of like the perceived notion that it's going for others and things like that. But for sure, yeah, I think we should empathize with people in those situations that are looked at as looked over. Honestly.
Lord, I'm going to throw it to you next. Should people of other races have empathy for white people and their experience of being white?
Yeah, I think so, because I think there's this really, really stupid response that comes from the left to like the white grievance thing and the way it works to get people like Trump or Bolsonaro or Boris Johnson in. It's like people will say we should just stop talking about race and only make it about class. I don't think that works for like a number of reasons, and that is kind of one of them, is really understanding that like white working class and like black and Hispanic working class people actually have a lot of common interest. And yeah, like those, like in order for any kind of opposition to like right-wing backlash to work, is like those groups kind of need to understand each other. So yeah.
How do you think that would work? Having empathy, expressing it for white people and their experience of being white. You covered a lot of things, classes, Trump versus Bolsonaro. What do you think the steps toward that would be?
I don't know. I think one thing you can do is trying to stop letting the right do this thing where they try to treat like racial equality as a kind of zero-sum game, even when it looks a lot like it. So like reparations would obviously cost white taxpayers, but then the whole intention behind it is that you don't have neighborhoods that are riddled with crime. You don't have like drug problems and things like that. So it's like, and this is the kind of thing that right-wingers complain about. So I think, yeah, people need to kind of like approach things in ways it's not just about like racial justice should not be about like white people, regardless of their status, just degrading themselves so that black people can rise up or Hispanic people can rise up. I don't think that's, but a lot of people sell it that way, which is like a right winger might fearmonger about that, and then the left response might be, well, yeah, good, you know, white privilege, get fucked. But yeah, I think that's like the biggest problem.
Do people of color have any moral obligation or responsibility to think or talk about this? So we white people are supposed to be anti-racist, right? If you're not anti-racist, you're racist. You're part of the problem. You're sitting there enjoying this. You might as well be a fucking KKK member. So does the same go for people of color? If you're in a place where people of color are advantaged, do you have a moral obligation to speak up for white people or empathize with white people actively? I say yes.
What, should like more black people stand up to, or stand up for white people to get banned on Twitter or whatever?
Yes.
So, yeah. So I would say this, like, I try to definitely stand up for injustices that I see. I will say that if you were to look at the things that I talk about most frequently, I think the things that impact black people are more I think there. I don't want to say more harmful, but that sounds good. But I think there are tons of things that
Hey, everybody
like,
else is saying it. You might as well say it too,
no,
Gambit. That's
no,
what
it's not
everybody
that.
is
It's
fucking
not
saying. This
that. No.
entire panel.
So no, but to answer your question, like specifically, yes, I think that if there are injustices in our society, we all should be trying to point those out. I think that the reason you may not see that is because there could be other problems that are also present, and that could be pulling attention away from those people who would stand up and say more.
Wait. It'll be pulling attention away from who?
Yeah,
Who's
so,
pulling
so
attention?
imagine if I think like anti-white racism is a problem, and I think like anti-black racism is a problem, it's possible that I could see that anti-black racism impacts me more, which results in like me talking about anti-white racism more. That doesn't mean that I don't stand in solidarity with people that are pointing those issues out, though.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But yes,
I-
to answer your question specifically, I think everybody would agree that if there's injustice in our society, regardless of your demographic, you should be attempting to alleviate that, right?
I guess it depends on what you mean by injustices. Does anybody not agree with that? I mean, Loner, you mentioned reparations, which is a surprise. You're talking about American reparations, I suppose. Is that something that everyone is universally for? Paying reparations at this point?
I have no idea what I'd imagine not. I've not looked at
Oh,
polling
yeah.
on it, but yeah.
No,
Personally,
That's the
how
problem.
about-
I'm talking about like the way people sell it, right? So, like another example is you mentioned affirmative action or quotas or something like that. And I mean, like we do that in the UK, especially for like the Muslim community or thereabouts. But the reason they do it is because people in the like, if you have like a Middle Eastern name, you're more likely to not get hired. Like there've been a lot of studies with that. So the problem then as well is that a big white grievance in the UK is that Muslim communities are very segregated and they're very ghettoized and very like in enclaves. But of course, you're going to be in enclaves if there's not really any social mobility. So I think a result of maybe like the last 10, 15 years of quotas and affirmative action towards that community is that recent polling has shown that like British Muslims feel kind of better than ever living in the UK, and also racism towards them has kind of gone down as well. So but that's the thing. I wish people could just frame it in a way that doesn't mean white give to brown and black. You know.
How would you phrase it? Go ahead. Gambit.
Oh no! I was just agreeing, but
Yeah. Is everyone on
The-
board with that, Mr. Girl?
You guys,
too?
you guys know the ADL, the Anti-Defamation
Oh
League?
God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like these Jews who are so afraid of another Hitler, another Holocaust, that they see anti-Semitism as like a wick that's lit and it's burning, and they got to go pour water on it every time they see it. They're like, no, you don't understand. You don't understand where it goes. We understand where it goes. You don't understand where it goes. And I feel like, Hunter, I'm still mad. I'm still mad at you about what you said 20 minutes ago. I feel like when you say, well, show me the consequences, I feel like if only you were a Jew, you would understand and see that this can lead to really bad things, especially if it's unchecked. And we've gotten to a point where if you advocate for white people, you are racist, especially if you're white. But even like what Gambit just said, even him saying like, yeah, well, you know, even kind of like back equivocating a little bit and saying like, well, everybody should stand up for everybody. Even that could get Gambit called like a white supremacist, apologist, conservative
sure.
asshole. So
sure.
I think we should also be talking not just about current consequences, but consequences down the line as white people are defined increasingly, especially on the left, as like second-class citizens or like targets.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that for the most part. Yeah. Sorry that
Well,
you're still
wouldn't
mad
you
at me
agree?
though.
You can't control my feelings. That's it's just part of political discourse.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm sorry.
I
I
don't
feel
hold
kinda
you-
guilty. Mostly because I'm white, but I mean, partially because I hurt your feelings. So.
No, you didn't hurt my feelings. You touched a nerve. But I don't expect to not get mad, and I don't hold you responsible for my outbursts.
Here's a question about guilt, Hunter. Maybe this will help you work out your white guilt. Do you think white people should feel guilty about slavery? Is there pressure for white people to pretend to feel guilty?
No white people should feel guilty about slavery. If they do, then most likely they are just virtue signaling or LARPing around trying to get brownie points from their other like privileged friends or something. No, nobody should feel guilty for things that they themselves have not done. As far as recognizing that slavery had negative impacts that still are negatively impacting Black people today, that is a different question. And that, I think, is a fine thing. But no, if anybody's feeling guilty because they're white and white people did slavery, then no, that they are very lost. That's never the right answer.
Does everyone agree with that? No white people should feel guilty about slavery?
I mean, it depends on what we mean by feel guilty. I mean, like, you can feel
Yeah.
bad about it, but, like, the problem is the word guilt implies some sort of moral responsibility. Like, if somebody tells me, you know, like, hey, you know, you were driving last night and you happened to, like, run over my cat even though you didn't see it or nothing happened, like, I'd feel guilty about it, but, like, I don't know if that's, like, my responsibility or something, you know? It's like, you can feel bad about things that have happened to people in the past, maybe even a little guilty that you've assumed a better position in society as a result of, like, you know, who you were born to or what area, what zip code you're in or what country you're in or whatever. But insofar as, like, that guilt implies some level of moral culpability or responsibility, that's probably not good. And we don't have different words to describe different types of guilt, I think.
Yeah, I think that when you asked even at the guilt question, I was instantly assuming like a personal guilt. Like, should I feel personally guilty for slavery because I'm a white person? No, then I would stick with my original take, of course.
So you
Yeah.
feel sort of a... Go ahead, Gambit. What do you think about the
No,
guilt?
I think, yeah, I was trying to work out how I feel, and I think I feel exactly what Hunter said. And I think that's maybe what most people don't say correctly, but yeah, it's not that we want people to feel personally guilty, but we want people to sympathize with or empathize with the impacts that it had and understand how those things can still be affecting Black people today. So yeah, I don't want anybody to be like at home crying, oh my God, it's like no, we just want people to understand it and voice that to people that don't recognize that that's the thing.
I think in a way some of the shaming rhetoric around slavery that comes, do we all agree that there is some degree of progressives like guilt tripping white people about slavery?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
I think
progressives, yeah.
Or there's, like, a modern take on it, too.
Oh
Anytime-
God! Oh
What?
damn it! Oh no! There are the Black progressives will guilt trip you about slavery.
Yeah, there's, like, the modern take on it is anytime you ever hear the C word, people are usually trying to allude to stuff like that. Colonialism. That's, like, another big way that people are feeling like shit on white
yes.
people is that word.
Mm.
Yeah, because because when you're talking about colonialism, you're only talking about white people colonialism, and it's usually just like I don't want to. I guess a dog whistle, yeah, for like shitting on white people.
It is.
basically, Yeah.
It's an anti-white dog whistle. Wow.
There's so many C words, I never know which one you guys are going to talk about. Every time you say it, it was the wrong one.
Not your favorite one. That's probably not going to come up in this discussion.
Come? How do you think that guilt, that feeling of guilt, is used against people, though? I don't know if everyone's so sophisticated with their feelings that they
White
can
wins.
express the difference between guilt as a person
Yeah.
and guilt as a group. What do you think
Well,
about that?
I think it backfires because it's and I think this has led to a lot of racism against Black people on the right. When in order to empathize with Black people, you also have to say that you did slavery and you're sorry. And when those ideas are packaged together, I think that it hurts everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think so as well. I mean, I think that if we want to acknowledge some of the issues that are still affecting Black people today from the past, the first thing that should be done is make sure that people don't feel like they are somehow personally responsible for this. Because the minute you try to guilt somebody or try to make them feel like this is all just white people's fault, like as in you are living as a white person today, you should somehow feel guilty. If anything, that's going to just lead to more resistance towards the end goal.
How do you square the idea of reparations?
I'm not really in favor of reparations. I mean, I never talked about it on the panel or anything, but yeah.
I'm not either. No. I don't mean you specifically. I don't mean you. How do you square your idea? But like, what I'm trying to get at is reparations, which is essentially a financial transfer from white people to Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like a settling a lawsuit?
Space.
What?
I said it's based.
its base.
I think
Is that
I think you
settling
can
the
make
laws?
you can
How-
make one
how-
you can make one good argument for reparations. I think, and that's
But
that.
how do you make an
Lots of
argument
good
for
arguments.
reparations that does not also blame white people for slavery?
I'm about to. Okay. So the one good argument you can make for reparations is that if it was the case that at times in the U.S. history there were promises made, people go back and forth about like 40 acres and a mule or whatever. If those promises were made, then there's an argument that those promises ought to be kept. Now, it's not white people that has to pay it. It's not because of slavery.
government.
It would be the United States government that has a general fund paid into by all sorts of different people, paying on past dues. It doesn't really have to do with the fact they're black, kind of, but like not really. It's just the fact there's a group of people, treaties were made or deals were made and they were broken. And if that is the case, and if that can be proved, and we all feel comfortable about that, then I think that paying something back for that is okay. I think that's an okay thing.
Mr. Gray,
anyone
if you
say
found
that-
out that if you found out that like there were black veterans that
Germany
were
was
promised. We can talk recent stuff. Well, this is relatively recent, not really recent. But if we say that there were black veterans that were promised money during the 60s and 70s, right? And those people are still alive, and we know those people's names, and we know that the government made them promises, but we know that disproportionately they weren't allowed to receive the funding that they were expected. You would say that paying those individuals what they are rightfully owed, like what Destiny just called out, you would say that that's a fair thing, right?
yes.
So you do believe in some form of reparations. So when people say they don't believe in
Wait a
reparations,
second.
I have no idea what's in your mind, right?
I believe in I believe that people should be paid the money owed to them. The question is, are the
Well-
descendants of slaves owed money?
I mean,
Not just
I
for
think
being
that's-
slaves, maybe. It would be for like deals on the book, things that you could trace, right? That would probably be how it would go.
I would
I
agree
think
with
there's
that.
so
Yes.
many other things that are less complicated than talking about. Let's go all the way back to slavery, right? We can talk
Okay.
about like the denial of loans and a bunch of things. Like
Yeah,
there's lots of things
walk me down the chain of logic. I'm going with you.
So if we talk about like redlining, right, and how black people were disproportionately put into areas that had low economic opportunity and were systemically denied through banks, through government policy. If we can point to those things and we can say these people were denied this because of their color, you would say that those things we can. It's just like the Japanese
so.
during. You don't think so?
I think that
So
would
don't
that would
they-
be I think that would be a civil court matter, not like a policy of the U.S. government. Like if you could prove that somebody, did
No,
something,
that would-
because
I can't remember exactly. This was dealing with the federal government as well, not just the. Not just.
Are you
the-
talking about
you just-
redlining
we talked about
specifically?
loans.
Because it was the Federal Housing Administration. Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that redlining it might have been like an approved practice, but at the end of the day, it was private banks and stuff that were making the decisions on who not to loan money to. No.
I'm not ready to have that debate right now, but
Okay.
yes,
We're the
there was-
federal-
there was-
Well,
Oh,
it's all theoretical. I think we're just trying to figure out where each. Okay,
that the government were going to influence the culture that accepted banks
Okay,
not
let's
lending loans to black people.
let's put it this way. None of us want to give the whole country back to the Native Americans, right? None of us want to leave, right? We took it. It's ours. We've had it for a while, and like it's not really rightfully ours, but we're keeping it because we really like this place. We've been here for a while, so we're keeping it. So we've gone from squatters to owners. So at a certain point, none of us believe in reparations, and we all believe that if you walk out of a bank and then somebody chases after you and says, "Hey, I just want to let you know that like because of your race, that's why your application went denied," we all agree that the bank should pay you back. So we all believe in reparations. The question is, where does the gravy train get derailed for each of us?
I would say
Uh,
if you're just going to start paying reparations like just across the board to black people, I think that would probably be like ridiculous. I think that I really agree with what Destiny said. Is there should be some kind of evidence that something was denied to Black people, and that is why then we are basically making up for a past wrong. And I guess this kind of goes into what we were saying a second ago about redlining. It was somewhat on a local level. There were local levels, state levels, but there was also federal segregation that played a huge role as well. For example, the Federal Housing Administration subsidized builders so long as they would only sell those houses to white people. So there was definitely some pretty blatant racism on the books that's been depicted here. So I mean, maybe we could look at that direction, but yeah, like if it's across the board, that would be ridiculous.
But would we also agree that a broad transfer of money to Black people now,
Will be based.
E-
Yeah. What?
even if some of us would like it, also is a little racist. Even if there's a justification for doing so, that to poor white people.
No, I think this
just
is
the idea that like it because of why you're poor.
No. Wait.
You
This is
don't-
why
you
it's so
don't
important.
get-
Wait, this
you
is
don't
why
get any
you
money.
have to have my perspective. Any other perspective fails.
Yeah.
It has to
I
be.
don't have to have your perspective.
If you want to make the argument, it does. It can't be because of race, and it can't be because of past wrongs. It has to be because a specific agreement was broken. If you get reparations or whatever, it's not because you were a slave, and it's not because you had a bad history because of slavery.
I know,
It's
but-
because the government made a deal with you and went back and broke it. That's and it would only be
The
Wait,
poor
Dusty, is that what they did to? Is that what they did in Germany with the reparations to Jews?
No, Japanese Americans, right, during the World War, right? Like, there were reparations paid. Well, I mean, I guess you don't have the right to be seized without proper investigation, right? But those people were given reparations due to what happened during the World War, right? Because they were wrong, like, criminally, but it wasn't like necessarily a financial transaction that was.
I think that was a
you think-
little
you think that if
different though
poor-
because they were able to solve it like immediately. Like if the federal government did something bad like right now, and we're talking about kind of reparations, that's fine. But when we talk about reparations for
Keep
slavery,
saying that-
Wait, I have a couple. If Black people were richer than white people now,
yes, you would still be paid back. Yeah,
would you? No. Would we be having this conversation?
we probably wouldn't be having the
Overall-
conversation, but you should still be paid back.
Okay.
That's
Okay, so to some extent, even though you can come up with a justification for reparations, to some extent, it is an attempt to remedy the plight of the Black man.
No,
today.
it's not. I've never said that. We're not.
I'm not saying
it's-
you're saying that. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying it's true because if Black people were really rich, we wouldn't be talking about giving them reparations.
True. That's
We're
why I'm
doing
saying
that
those are
because Black
dog shit
people-
arguments. If you're making that type of an argument, then you're.
I'm not making an argument. I'm
I'm not
pointing
saying
out-
you are. But I'm saying you're attacking an
not
argument that no one else is making because it's a dog shit argument. If you're trying to, you keep saying that like,
no, I'm
oh,
not
like you
attacking
can't.
the argument. I'm
Well, then why
saying
even bring it up?
Because while you are making a compelling argument for reparations, you are smuggling in why we're even talking about the reparations in the first place.
I'm not smuggling that in. It's part of the conversation. If you want to ask
Well,
the whole
it's-
panel,
yeah,
is
but-
anybody here in favor of just paying Black people back because they were wronged without like any extra like qualification? Shut the besides
No,
Gambit.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that as the representative, the sole defender of the white man on the fucking panel now, I want to point out that the only reason we're talking about reparations for Black people is because we're trying to find a justifiable reason to transfer money to Black people and not white people that makes sense. And while you are very good at articulating and coming up with those justifications, the task at hand is how can we give these poor Black people some money and have it like not piss off white people too much? I don't think there's an answer to that question because it will and probably should piss off poor white people. I think
Well,
we
if
want to
we're
give
gonna-
poor.
If we're taking Destiny's approach, maybe, well, this isn't exactly Destiny's approach because Destiny, you said if it was a promise that we then went back on, there are a lot of places where we might actually be in favor of reparations where there was never actually a promise made that they then went back on.
Exactly.
It could just be like something with redlining, which deliberately was an effort by the federal government that we have on the books, which showed that they were purposely trying to further segregate America.
Yeah, I
essentially.
understand, but the problem
But
is
also-
that it's
well-
shitty. But like, we're a democracy. If that's what we decided at the time was fine, then I mean, like, if we were to go back and we were to redo every single or pay somebody back for every single unfair law, or whatever, I don't know, like Native Americans would be impacted, probably Asian Americans
what
would be
I'm saying,
impacted,
well,
Irish.
yeah, what I'm saying is that if
We've
we
given
were going to
reparations.
take the approach of something like, for example, redlining, and we were simply going to say, here is a policy that disproportionately fucked over Black people, I don't think it should just be Black people that get reparations. I think it should be, if we're going to go that route, it should also apply to white people who were fucked over by redlining also, because white people were screwed over by redlining as well. just not to the same degree.
Yeah, just not disproportionate. Yeah.
It shouldn't be
But
on the
so-
basis
so-
of race,
But
no
there's,
matter
but there's
what.
nobody.
So,
But Hunter,
Destiny,
there's
hold on, you
nobody.
don't agree with any of the reparations that we paid to Native Americans? A lot of it was due to just
Did we
fucking over
pay
Native
reparations
Americans.
to Native Americans, or did we just finally give them some land that they should have on?
That's a
Yeah, I
form
thought
of
it was just
reparations too.
reservations.
Reparations doesn't necessarily mean money. But that's a
So-
form of reparations as well. There's multiple reparations that we not saying that we've given enough for somebody to try to put in our context, blah blah blah. I don't want to get in that argument, but we have given Native Americans things because of historic wrongs that have happened that aren't due to broken promises.
Yeah,
The
so
one
when you
who
start getting into like
people-
US policies, I don't even know how you would even start to get into like who caused what wrong for what reason. It just seems like it would be so hard.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you can empathize with, you can agree with the idea that there can be a historic wrong that happened that wasn't due to like some sort of financial agreement that in which we should pay reparations, right?
But that's the hard one, like, because there were probably genuinely, this is the most racist conservative talking point, but there were generally probably some black people that wouldn't have qualified for a loan or wouldn't have qualified for a mortgage in some areas, right? But so like, how do you begin to make the determination of like, well, who got racially affected by
That's
redlining?
what we get a committee together for, a Senate committee together for, and they figure it out. But I'm saying you can agree with the idea that you can do a wrong to a certain demographic of people, and you could give reparations just because a wrong was done, not necessarily due to a financial transaction that you didn't uphold, right? You agree with that, right?
I don't know.
But like, there's nobody.
I don't know. I
there's
think.
nobody-
Wait. I think.
We have no agree in this panel, though. Just letting y'all know, just winning the reparations. But go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll
but
stay here.
obviously this whole kind of concern. I don't know about the concern about like, so if we give like reparations out too broad, they might go to people who didn't really have them coming. But I guess that's kind of like saying like, should we really like impose sanctions on this nation because it might affect people who live in that nation who have nothing to do with what that nation's guilty of doing. So, but I think that's the point of like it's never going to be like this perfectly clean thing.
Yeah.
But I think an example of it succeeding would be like Germany, right? Because I wish I could remember, but I think in Germany they didn't. It wasn't just Holocaust survivors who got reparations. It was Jewish organizations that were started after the Holocaust, and it was also about like monuments and memorials and museums, and like they built those stepping stones. So like outside every house of every Jew that died, there's like a stone that has like where they were born, where they died, what their name was. But as far as I know, that was quite successful, wasn't it? Because like the anti-Semitism is not. Nearly, like,
but when
even compared to other Europe,
when did they
nowadays.
do that? Yeah, but that we're talking the proximity. To
They're
the-
still doing this like to this day. I think it's been
There's
it's
no
something like $100 billion now.
exactly the right group of people to pay back, right? We all agree that there's going to be some inefficiency in selection, and there will be a group of people who may not have deserved it that get it, but because we feel like we're correcting the wrong, that's why we go on that endeavor, right? Like, it's never going to be the case that, oh yeah, we found the names of the 57 people we need to give reparations to, and it's only them, and we did it through all of this analysis, right? There's going to be some broad, in some ways, there's going to be inefficiency or broadening, whereas we give to a group, and it may be that some of them didn't deserve it, right? We never split hairs like this in reparations.
Yeah, that's not my problem with it though.
Okay.
I'm not afraid of black people who didn't like. I don't
I'm
care
afraid
about
of
that.
black people.
Well, sure.
My question is, like, if-
especially today.
If we start to do like really broad reparations to just anybody who kind of qualifies being black, like at what point is it justified? Well, at what point is it justified for me to do blackface? Like maybe I.
No, wait, hold on. It wouldn't be to black
and I
people.
go-
We're not talking about black people right now for reparations. It would be for African Americans. It'd be to
Well, I
citizens
just mean on a
slaves.
broad. If we were going to go for the direction
Okay,
of broad.
Okay. Here's my problem with reparations. My problem is that it just seems like a rationalization for giving money to black people.
Do you think
As
the
a
same
way-
about reparations to Jews? And
I just wanted to do blackface. I'm sorry.
I don't think the same thing
I
about
kinda-
reparations to Jews who are actually Holocaust survivors. No.
Okay.
And I think that reparations should have been paid to black people after they were freed. I would definitely agree with that. But I Think now, if in 200 years a bunch of Jews are like, we should get some money from the German government. We should get money from the German government. Then we didn't get our money. They didn't pay enough reparations, and I traced back my family. And you know what? I found out this was stolen. This was stolen. I have an itemized list of like things that were stolen from my great grandmother, and I want my money back. Then I would say no.
Okay, yeah, but I don't think I would say that.
I want to make sure you understand this, Mr. Girl. Most people aren't arguing the position that you're arguing against right now. Most people.
Let me explain my position because I don't think I'm getting it across correctly.
Okay.
I understand that there is a sound, logical chain that you can follow to justify reparations, and that it makes sense and it's full of good arguments that are inarguable, and that you can come up with good analogies for all of them. My problem is, why are we making the arguments, and why is the question being asked in the first place? I don't think anybody is looking through Hunter's lineage to go back and find out if some government and some place screwed over his family, and if he should get a check for some reason. And I don't think he cares about that. So so while you can come up with a justification for it that is sensible and makes sense and sounds like good policy, my problem with it is that I don't think we're really talking about why we're even trying to come up with that justification. And it seems like the answer is because black people are poor, on average, poorer than white people. We're trying to give them money. And if black people weren't poor on average, I think we've all conceded that we wouldn't even be trying to figure out a way to transfer the money. So just,
I can help you there. I can help you there. If Hunter had a big enough family that was a big enough demographic in our country, and we could trace the wrong that you just talked about to Hunter's family that's probably still living or something, we would agree with reparations for that group of people, right? So I think the problem is...
I wouldn't. No, at a certain point, I'm like you. What every fucking person in the country can, or every person on Earth can come up with some wrong that was done to their ancestors.
Yeah,
by a government. And then
yeah, you said ancestors, right? You continually switch the context.
Keep in mind that we did some form of reparations. Conservatives will not hear one
I'm trying to make a meta. I'm trying to explain my problem. My problem with the argument has nothing to do with the contents. Wait, will you just let me? Will you? Dick, make him stop.
Go ahead.
Please.
He's laughing.
Please.
Go.
Wait, okay, wait, hold on, wait. Can I do this for 2 seconds? Because hold on, we're arguing so much about nothing. We're arguing about so much about nothing. Okay, we all agree, Mr. Girl. Everybody agrees with you. The only reason we're having this conversation is because black people are really poor today, and it seems like one of the reasons why is because of systemic injustice that happened in the past. But if they weren't poor today, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We all agree with that.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
So this is the ball of arguments that make up why we should
And
do
you're still going to
reparations.
explain it again. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to explain it again. This is the ball of arguments. Everything within this ball is why we should give black people reparations, and or how, I guess, the rationalization for it. And I'm trying to make a meta argument of like, well, why do we have the ball out? And Stephen, as you just said, it's because black people are poor. We want to give money to them. Every time I make a meta argument, one of you every time I make a meta argument, one of you fucks dives back into the ball and starts making internal arguments